Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Ricky,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode
Number 53.
Hey, we're glad to have you. Just a quick reminder, we are still celebrating our 1-year anniversary to podcasts.
Our podcast anniversary.
That. So please go listen to episode number 52, and in the description of that episode is a link. Click that link and you will go to a form. Fill out that form and you will be submitted for a drawing for 3 free coaching sessions.
Regardless of you are a new or current client, you can win 3 sessions. And we have been getting your submissions. Thank you very much. By the way, it's a really, really, really short, quick form. Not long at all. Probably take you 30 seconds. And we do appreciate the suggestions that are coming in. And we are collecting those names for the drawing. So
A $450 value, and even more if we save your marriage. It'd be worth a lot more than that. So come join us. We would love to have you. Today, we're going to talk about something that we have talked a lot about almost in every podcast, but we're going to have a specific episode just about this. And we see it come up in almost every one of our coachings. As we go about talking about a marriage and what is made of this marriage and some of the things that we see and struggle with, oftentimes around sexuality, what we've realized, whether you're having good sex or not, really doesn't make a good marriage. It's more of the canary in the coal mine. Some people think, hey, fix the sex and the marriage will get better. We really prescribe to the sex is telling us how the marriage is doing. And one of the major foundations of that is emotional connection and how we connect emotionally. So today we're going to talk all about emotional connecting, why it's important in marriage, how it helps us get to where we want to go sexually, and what we can do to make it better.
So often couples come in and what they want is to address something like frequency or type of sexual intimacy or desire differences, something like that. And what we've learned from coaching is that those definitely are what is presenting. Absolutely. And they definitely are conflicts that a couple is facing. Absolutely. But in order to unravel or untangle those conflicts, you have to go to a deeper level, and that's our emotional level. What is the emotional meaning of those things for each person? And what emotions are we either afraid of or are in because of the meaning frames we're in? Or have we carried into the marriage from our childhood and we're trying to get them met through this relationship? We go through how to first become aware of your emotions because we find clients at all different points. Some of them have completely dissociated from their emotions and are just living in this like neutral, numb state. And intimacy requires presence. So we have to move out of the numbness. Some are very overreactive and very activated and a lot of high intense emotions. And with those, we want to be aware of what those emotions may be calling attention to or what cry for help they are. And so after we've gotten awareness of maybe what the emotions are, then we work on how to individually process them, which we'll talk about today. And then we work on how to address those within a couple. And there are all different developmental points that this brings up in us as an adult. In order to build really thriving relationships, you really have to have a capacity to be aware of your emotions, to know how to work through them, and also how to create space for your spouse's emotions.
Yeah, let's even take a little step backwards because we're using emotions pretty generally.
Yeah.
But I think To me, I've always heard about emotions and what they are, but I don't think I really understood the actual thing that's happening within us and why we have emotions. As human beings, our brains work in two major ways. There's a primitive way that our brain works that reacts to our environment and things that are happening to us. And then there's the logical side of our brain where we can put logic behind the things that are happening to us and try to understand them. That's what really separates us from all the other creatures on the earth, right? Because
Mhm.
every other creature reacts to their
Mhm.
situation. But we have this logical part of our brain where we can add logic to what's going on and really decide what's happening. And
I would change it from logic to meaning
meaning, that's a very
because
good way of
logic
doing it.
sounds more factual. Meaning implies both the intellectual and the emotional.
Right. I mean, just in the basic concept, like if we're walking around the corner and someone jumps out and says, boo, if you're Amy,
You're
you'll
going to
pee your
jump
pants first
10
and then you're
feet in
like
the
fall on the
air.
ground and die because
Yes.
she can. I remember when we were engaged, no idea that she was so excitable and scareable. I don't know if that's a word, but that's what it was. We were shopping for apartments, and last week we talked about the difficulty of finding an apartment. So we were in the middle of trying to find that two apartment in San Diego, which was hard in itself. And we were walking in to the master bedroom closet. I'd been there the whole time with her. She knew I was there.
I feel told on.
I walked around the corner and she turned around and she went, and she almost fell down and died in Peter Pants. So it's never been a challenge to scare Amy in any form of imagination. But what's literally happening is her body is getting that information and it's just reacting. It's sending emotional chemicals into our body. That's what the brain does. It just pounds our body with chemicals and wants you to react, fight, flight, whatever you're going to do to react to
Flee,
that.
fawn.
Yeah, all those different types of things. And that's what's happening in that moment. Now, if Amy would stop and pause and use the other side of her brain, the meaning side of her brain, to go, oh, that's just Greg walking around the corner who's been with me this whole time. And I know he's there and he's not scary that I know of yet. I don't know him real well because we're just engaged. So
Oh,
maybe
he's
he is
scary.
scary. So maybe it was natural and should do that. But really, that side of the brain saying, oh, this is a situation I'm in. I'm okay. And that's just a silly analogy to try to explain the basis of what we're going to be talking about because it gets a lot more complex than that as we start adding people and things and unknowns and all of the things in life that are around us that our brain's trying to figure out and wanting to know whether it should protect us in this situation, that we should do something reactionary, or whether we're okay.
And we can respond
We
instead of
respond.
react. Yeah. I had a friend in the grocery store once think it would be fun to grab me from behind as she came around the corner when I didn't see her. And when I went into like
I can't even
convulsions on
imagine.
the
I
floor.
can't imagine. I wouldn't even dare do that because I announced myself. I'm coming up the stairs. I'm almost there.
Anyways, so yes, we have so emotions are the physical sensation that describe our perspective, our thoughts, our beliefs, or the experience that we're having. They're created by the amygdala. They're two almond-shaped organs that sit above the primitive brain, which is at the base of your neck. So you have your primitive brain, and then right above it are these two amygdala. And they send a chemical into your body that corresponds with your meaning frame, your belief, your perspective, however you are viewing a circumstance, the words your spouse is saying, the actions of your spouse or others, et cetera, et cetera. And so they are the descriptor of what you're believing or feeling. And these are wildly different. Two people sitting in the exact same circumstance with the exact same, whether it's words or behaviors or interactions, will have very different meanings for that. And from those meanings, they will have very different emotions.
Amy can walk around the corner in the closet all the time, and I just smile and happy that she's there. I never jump for fear.
And I think what spouses do often is get in a fight over whose meaning is right and to justify their experience. And they don't know what to do with the emotions. They feel like perhaps that the emotions describe them, or that the emotions are factual, or that the the emotions are an indicator about them. And so there's lots of misunderstandings about emotions, but they're literally the representation in your body
Right.
because those chemicals that come from your amygdala go into different parts of your body. So maybe you'll feel tightness in your chest or discomfort in your stomach, or like your legs or arms are really heavy, or you might feel spinning in your head. You might feel tightness in your throat or like heaviness on your back. So they're like the physical manifestation of what you're thinking, believing, feeling.
Right. And we as humans we can really do two major things with it, right? There's a lot of ways to process through this, but we usually as humans do two other things. We react to them, or we try to ignore them and have them go away and not react to them. And emotions in general aren't good or bad. They're not good or bad. In fact, having emotions is good because it's your brain working with you, trying to keep you safe, right? And help you understand the situation you're in. There's generally positive and negative emotions, and we label them that way, whether the feelings we get from them. Did that bring you positive, happy, joyful feelings? Did that bring you
Or I would say
negative or
sensations
sensations
in your
in your
body.
body?
Yeah.
And so they're generally doing it. And we can either recognize them, deal with them, understand them, and react to decide to think about them, or we can try to ignore them and get them to go away. The problem is they're like a 2-year-old, a toddler. When's the last time your toddler stopped banging on the bathroom door saying, Mom, 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 Mom? Never. And that's what our brains are doing. They want us to recognize it. That's why they use this tool they have of sending chemicals in our body as, again, signals they're sending, right? Because we can think and we can do all the things, but it's a quicker reaction for them to send these chemicals and it's say, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And really that's what it's trying to do.
Yeah. So I like to say quite often that emotions describe the experience we're having, but they aren't who we are. We are separate
Right.
from our emotions, but they are giving us a manifestation of the experience we're having. And they're often trying to protect us or teach us something or indicating what we're fearful of or trying to guide us in some way. And when you're willing to engage or listen or be aware of them, they will then be all of those things. They will be the guide, they will be the informer, they will be the thing teaching and helping and supporting you, as opposed to often people are afraid of emotions or they have this idea if you
Defines who they are.
or that if you are aware of your emotions, you will be emotional
Yeah, and you don't want to be that.
and that the emotions would control you. Being aware of your emotions actually does quite the opposite. It puts you in the driver's seat. And what's often happening is people have maybe dislike or fear or a negative experience with emotions because they have been driving their behavior without their awareness.
Right.
And so instead we flip it, right? Awareness, and you drive your behavior, not the emotions.
Of all the classes we get taught in school, this isn't one of them.
No,
It's probably one of the most important ones, right? If you could get down to the basics, it's the way that we're perceiving life around us and dealing with it. And we either
we're not
deal, or
dealing with
that's what I'm
it.
saying. We either deal with it in a good way or we ignore it and don't deal with it. And oftentimes it's the don't thing. I mean, I think for me growing up as a man in my culture, I was taught that I shouldn't have them, right? That I needed to be stalwart. I needed to be the one that took care of everything. That if I had too many emotions, it would impact everyone else. How could I be a great father? How could I be a great husband if I was so emotional that I couldn't control them? And so that's the thing I was taught. I think a lot of us were taught that way. And as Amy said, it's just really the opposite that we learn, that ignoring them and acting like they're not there drives you to behaviors that you don't like, that's not part of your integrity. Understanding that they're there and they're giving you information about your situation that you're in and that you can use that information to benefit you in one way or the other, and acting on that really is the important thing, to be able to use this as a beneficial mark. Both the negative and the positive emotions, all of them are giving you information, but yet I was trained to get rid of them, push them down. And we know that they don't go away. Like it's a beach ball effect. You push those emotions down, 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 and they just end up popping out and coming out
They grow in
more
intensity
because
because
they're
the
trying to get to,
amygdala keeps sending it.
yeah,
Again, you referred to the toddler. That
and they're
amygdala
going to
keeps
pop out
sending
no
that
matter what.
chemical until it is quite strong, or you've now layered it with other emotions, and then it is more difficult to engage and get the feedback from emotions because they're so intense.
That's right. So we're talking about this and we're talking about individual emotions. But Amy, why is it so key for you as an individual to understand, one, you have emotions and how to process through those in an intimate relationship?
Well, it's part of being a whole self. When you are in a relationship, you have to have two whole entities. And what I find is that couples often either absorb the emotions of their spouse or take ownership of the emotions of their spouse. And then you no longer have two whole entities. Without two whole entities, you can't actually have a relationship. The other thing I find is one spouse may disinvest or pull away. Again, without two whole entities, you can't have a relationship. So, first, this relationship starts with yourself to create that awareness and that sense of self and that wholeness. Like, yes, this is me. This is who I am and what I believe and how I want to show up, and be aware of where your challenges and struggles are, where you're wanting to develop, aware of maybe what your strengths are, maybe aware of your desires and how you maybe want to develop as a human being. So there's this sense of me, this sense of I am a whole person and I am in close contact with this other whole person. And in that close contact, what we find is, again, emotions either get absorbed or you take responsibility for it, or you completely disinvest because you don't know what to do with them.
Right.
So
you just explained the foundations, and we've talked about a lot, and maybe we should have started with the foundations. Now I'm thinking about this, but you just explained the foundations of differentiation, right? You just explained it in emotional states. So when we're talking about enmeshment, when we're talking about differentiation, that was the first you talked about, when our emotions are so enmeshed with each other that we can't control them, and we are tied together no matter what happens. I impact you, you
a
impact
relationship
you,
blob,
and
where
we
you're all mixed in
it's a big old
together,
blob.
and there's not a separate you or me, and you have an emotion and then I mirror that emotion, and then we're reacting and reacting and reacting and reacting, and not one of us is an individual, but we're both in this like blob.
So you just explained enmeshment emotionally. And then the other side of the coin, which is just as bad but completely opposite, is when you're toxic independent, right? And you explain that as you're dismissive and you don't care about the other person's emotion, and you're disinvested, and you don't engage because you're worried about bringing up emotions, and you don't want to be that part. And so you're not a whole person to yourself, and you're
you've taken
yourself
away. And you've removed.
So now you're not within close, intimate relationship
you're not available
with that person
to have a relationship because you have disinvested.
And it's, as you go through and try to figure this out, it's very normal to actually flip back and forth between these two sides emotionally, because you're learning and you're like moving and like, is this right? Is this right? We found ourselves doing that, where we knew we didn't want to be enmeshed because we were completely enmeshed emotionally. And we started coming out of that and pulling away. And I ran to the other side of the coin, right? I became toxic independent. And we're actually on a coaching call with Jennifer from Families from Five. And she said, well, good try, but you didn't quite do it right. You went to the other side of the coin. And I've had to actually encourage some of my clients to go there, because when we teach them about this, sometimes they get so afraid. I don't want to be toxic independent. I don't want to be toxic independent. And they don't move at all. They don't change where they're at, and they stay enmeshed. I almost have to encourage them to say, go feel what it feels like to be that, right? You kind of got to go play in that water a little bit to understand what it is and what it isn't.
So it's the capacity to have a whole self and be in close connection to another. It's the balance of attachment and autonomy. So autonomy, again, is knowing yourself, having an anchor into yourself, knowing your emotions, being aware of your emotions. But the attachment piece is, and I also make room that you are a whole person and you're having your own emotions and experiences. I don't have to take ownership of them. I don't have to disinvest to be okay. I don't have to distance to be okay. There's room for me in my experience and you in your experience.
And those two experiences are completely different.
Yep.
That was a huge thing that I had to learn, right? I couldn't understand why it didn't look the same way for Amy, why she didn't have the same emotions, why she wasn't processing the situation the same way. I wanted her to think, act, and feel just like me. But in the end, we couldn't be intimate in that way either because of the two same people that wouldn't be room for this intimacy anyway. So it was really me understanding and going through the process of one, what emotions are in the first place, and that I have them and they're not bad. And two, when I can process through them and understand them and stand on my own, I can be my whole self. And that will allow me to give room for Amy and allow her into my life, and that we can be connected in an intimate way. And so that's kind of why I said maybe we should have started here, because really it's emotions that are the foundation of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
They are what allow you to be in an intimate relationship. And if you want to have great sex, you have to be emotionally connected.
First to yourself and then room for another.
And we see this all the time, right? Because we were going through years where physically it worked, right? We both had orgasms. I thought it was great. And then afterwards, I would sit there and feel the most empty feeling because I look at Amy and she looked like she'd just been stolen from and taken from because we didn't have our emotions in check. We didn't have that emotional connection. So we were engaging in this physical intimacy without the emotional intimacy, and it caused resentment and it caused pain. When I found out that I was actually causing PTSD symptoms in Amy because she was doing this out of obligation, and that's why she felt empty. It was just so eye-opening and scary in some ways. But in reality, when we got down to the bottom of it, it was all about emotions and learning about them and how we can understand them and process through them.
So let's talk about processing, because this is the part that people go, okay, what does that mean? Let me walk you through processing an emotion. So the first step is to actually name the emotion that you're feeling. Give it a name. Frustration, annoyance, sadness, sorrow, despair, betrayal, hurt. And on the more positive side, joy, connection, delight, comfort, calm, peace, whatever it is. Often we don't have to work through the positive emotions. So that's why most often when you're processing an emotion, it's going to be more on the negative side. Not that negative is bad, again. It's just that positive ones, we tend to do this more naturally and we don't tend to get stuck in them and we don't tend to have any difficulty with them.
Right. Remember when we talked about earlier about, hey, if we can put some logic or meaning around that in the brain.
They have mapped out the brain. Obviously, they've mapped out the amygdala, they mapped out the primitive brain. And so through functional MRIs, they can tell what parts are activated. Your prefrontal cortex is the wiser, more capable of taking in a lot of details and seeing like long term. It's more able to respond, where your primitive brain is more reactive. And so what they did is brought in two groups of people. They did a functional MRI of all of their brains to get a baseline, showed them fear-based images. Half of the group, they had identify what it was that they felt looking at those images, whether it was terrified, scared, worried, fear, whatever it was. And then they did another functional MRI to see where their brains were at. The other group, they just showed them the images and then did the MRI again. And the difference was when they were able to name what their emotional experience was, the amygdala, after being activated by seeing those images, had returned much closer to the baseline. And if they didn't name what they felt while looking at those images, then their amygdala was on fire. Their primitive brain was on fire. And what that essentially means, when your primitive brain is on fire with your amygdala, you don't have access to your prefrontal cortex. You don't have access to that wiser self. So a lot of us get young. We get regressive. We revert to coping strategies, defense mechanisms, to reacting and things like that. And so the capacity just to even name an emotion tells that amygdala and your primitive brain, I got the message. We are afraid. We are feeling betrayed. We are feeling alone. We are worried, whatever it is. And again, calms down that amygdala. Even by just doing that, you're going to have more capacity to the other parts of your brain. So even that first step of just naming it is crucial to processing it. Even though it seems like, really, I have to name this, it also gives you awareness of what that emotion feels like in your body. So you are more aware of when you shift into that emotional space. Often our narratives or our beliefs that accompany these emotions are so familiar we don't notice those. But you will notice more of a shift in your body. And so identifying this is fear, this is loneliness, this is irritation, this is anger, this is justification, this is hurt, helps you recognize those shifts so that you can then start this next process that we're going to talk about of being aware of what might have created that emotional shift. And the second step, then, after you've named it, is to go find it in your body. This is the part that Greg fought with forever and thought was woo woo. And it is kind of woo woo.
Well, the funny part of it sounds like so woo woo. Like Amy would say, "Go find this in your body." It's like, look at this color, and I don't know. It just sounded woo woo. But it hit me one time when we were teaching the subject at a retreat, and we were talking about it, and I kind of connected the dots. And maybe I was stupid and couldn't connect the dots soon enough. But when I connect the dots, I'm like, oh, it's just science-based facts, right? Because the amygdala is actually secreting chemicals and pushing them into your body, of course they got to go somewhere, right? And when a chemical goes somewhere in your body, there's going to be a reaction. You're going to be able to feel that. And so instead of it being woo woo, it was literally those finding where the chemicals had gone in your body. Where were you holding those feelings at? And so if I don't know why it took me so long, but it finally clicked that this was what was happening. It's not woo woo at all. It was just practically science. I think one of the things that really kind of helped me connect the dots was at that retreat, there was a physical therapist there. And he specialized in wound care, physical wounds. And he said, the thing that I have to do is get people to actually act with, engage in that wound, even though it causes pain. So if I have a major wound, we're going to massage it. We're going to irritate it. We're going to make it move. And you would think that would be just the opposite. Like, no, we got to stop it. We don't want to feel that pain. We can't do that. But this is where it finally connected all the dots for me in the brain. He says, this is why we have to do this. Because if we don't do it, the brain sends all the things it needs to fix that. It will blood cells and whatever the science stuff that I don't understand.
But it does
the inflammation, whatever it needs down there, it will send it to that wound. That's why we start scabbing over. The blood stops flowing, right? Because we've clogged the blood and it starts scabbing over and the wound starts to heal. It will send what it thinks it needs to do it. If we don't react with that wound, we don't irritate it, the brain doesn't know whether it's done a good job or not, or whether it needs more or less of it. So until we interact or react with that wound, those signals won't go back to the brain. But as soon as they do go back to the brain and say, ow, it still hurts, we need to still fix it, the brain will now process it and actually fix it faster. And when he told that story, I was like, oh my goodness. This is the exact same thing that's happening in our body with emotions. They're sending it into emotions and the body is sending it somewhere and it's there. And because they're painful at times, especially the negative ones, we don't want to touch them. We want to just pretend they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel tightness in my chest, but I'm just going to pretend it's not there
Mm-hmm.
because I'm worried about what it's telling me. And it's the same thing with that big old wound on that person's arm or wherever it's at, sitting there, not being healed because we're not interacting with it. And as soon as we're able to send signals back to the brain saying, one, I got it and understand it, or I understand where it's at, then it will know what to do and react to it. And that's why this woo-ness finally unwooed, I guess is what you call it. I don't know. Became unwooed. But it was just science, and I thought I was a woo-woo the whole time, but it really is the scientific.
Thank you. So, yes, you go find it in your body. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, it might feel like nausea in your stomach. It might feel like tightness in your chest. It might feel like inability to breathe. Or some people talk about tangled knots or pokey things in their stomach, or feel like they're moving through, like their limbs are just so heavy, they're moving through molasses, or like heavy rocks in a backpack, or tightness, constriction in the throat, or swirling head, like it goes somewhere. I've had people have hurt toes or feeling like they're being pulled from the right by their neck, or a feeling of deep bruising somewhere. Engaging with where the sensation is showing up in your body sends that signal again back to the amygdala, back to the brain that says, okay, they're getting the message.
Yeah. I know something's going on.
Something's going on here. They're getting the message. We think they're going to listen. We think,
It's crazy because the first two things, you haven't resolved anything.
nope, not
You've
yet.
literally like named what it is, and two, you've said, "Yep, I get the chemicals going there." That's it. But it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it really does. The research is showing that concentrating on wherever the sensation is in your body, or at least 60 to 90 seconds, so for a minute or two, helps release that chemical, helps actually metabolize wherever it's showing up. So just the capacity to notice and concentrate and allow for that sensation, which if we're dealing in a negative emotion is probably going to be a negative sensation, right? And your capacity to accept and allow and recognize that tells the brain, okay, stop sending.
And it makes a lot of sense, right? If it stops sending that chemical doesn't sit there forever. It has a half-life. It's gonna go somewhere and finally resolve itself and dissolve and go into your system. And so it's really the stop of having that chemical scent that allows us to process through it and have it go away, that feeling go away.
It's like that feedback loop. It's like,
Yep.
okay, they got the message. And once you have calmed down that sensation, you have more access actually to all of the wiser parts in your brain, to your prefrontal cortex and your mid cortex, the ones that are more able to respond instead of react, that are more able to be curious instead of defensive. And so that's when you start moving from your body. Notice the first two steps were noticing what was happening in your body, naming it and feeling it. Then you can actually start moving back into your brain, because now you've actually gotten a little bit wiser. You've opened up capacity to be wiser.
You're able to put meaning behind what's going
You're
on.
able to
Right?
put meaning. I often will tell the emotion, whatever it is, thank you. Thank you for coming. And then I'll either have compassion for it or acceptance or some type of opening up that really allows that to calm. You can breathe. You can just notice it. And then you start asking questions. What is this emotion trying to show me, teach me, protect me from? How might it be trying to help me? Is there something I'm afraid of? Is there something that's unaddressed? Is there a past wound or hurt that this brings up and it has conjured up this emotion? And you're now starting to dig to more of those meanings.
I found like as I've gotten better at this, I start kind of unwinding it and understanding it. And
Unravel.
then
Yeah.
as soon as I unwind something and that emotion kicks back in, I realize one, oh, there's something there I need to go dig at, right? When I talked about the last podcast, right, where we had this budget crisis talk and I sat there and I couldn't say a word to Amy, this is kind of the process that was going on. So I was peeling it back. What does this mean about me? How do I think about that? What am I doing? So I'd kind of finally gotten rid of the original, like real deep filling emotion. And I'd get to one place and all of a sudden it would come rushing back in. As I went to open my mouth and say something to Amy and I unraveled that, it came rushing back in. And that's why I told her, I said, that's why I just stayed silent. Because I was trying to peel that back and say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And I got to a place where I had so much buried in there that I just couldn't say anything. And so that's kind of how I've seen it in reality play out with me, is that not only now we're in our brain doing it, but as we get curious and start peeling back and thinking, we can get signals again that will tell us, hey, there's a path to go walk down. And what we want to do is like, let's avoid that. Here comes that. Here it comes again. Oh no, avoid it.
Yeah.
Here it comes. I can't control it. But we got to learn to say, that's telling you again, there's something there.
Mhm.
We've tapped on a nerve. Amy and I talk about it in coaching, trailheads. This is what we talk about, trailheads.
Mhm.
I never got this at first when I was talking to Amy and I started coaching, and I'm like, oh, you have no idea where you're going, but all of a sudden you'll be talking and having this conversation and a trailhead will open up. You
Yeah.
go, oh, there's something there.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is. And I never will know what it is. The person I'm coaching will know what it is, but this is the trail we're going to go down and see if we can find it out. And I think it's a lot of the same way as you deal with your own emotions. As you tap back and you all of a sudden it comes back, you're like, oh, I need to go figure that out. And sometimes it's not as deep as that. Some of the other ones that I've dealt with, I'm like, oh, I can see where that's coming from. I feel like I need to be validated because I'm insecure in that area and I'm seeking validation. And right away I can say, hey, I don't need that validation. I'm fine. And I can resolve it. But some of these deeper ones will require us to dig a little bit, get that emotion to come back, poke at it, dig a little bit, unpill it. And it's not the most pleasing and happy and fun process,
No.
but the outcome of dealing with it is a much better outcome than saying, I'm going to avoid it.
Yes. Or ignore, or try and suppress. I remember when I first learned about emotions. First of all, I was shocked that they were separate from me. I thought I was my emotions. So even that first step was like, what? And then when I started noticing them, I had this perception that I was a fairly happy person. And what I noticed was a lot of discontent and a lot of resentment. And it was kind of shocking. And as I started to recognize and become aware of how much resentment there was, then I started, feeling it and engaging and asking these questions and going on this journey. I discovered that part of our enmeshed pattern, I had really given myself up to Greg. And in giving myself up to him, I was resentful of that. I was resentful of not showing up, of not speaking my own voice. But it wasn't that he had done that
I
to
hadn't
me.
taken it from her. Like
I had,
I didn't want it.
no, you definitely didn't want it. I had given it up thinking that that was goodness and that this was the best way to be in a marriage. And so the resentment was showing me really all the places that I had given myself up that I needed to actually take ownership back of, that were actually mine, that I needed to reclaim. It was showing me areas that I needed to speak up. And I had a voice, I just wasn't using it. And so often that's what's really underlying these. A lot of times anger will show boundaries, or anger will
It's usually just the
indicate,
smoke of the fire, right?
yeah, like what you're not listening to, where you're feeling unheard, and or a lot of people might feel trapped or abandoned, and then it's to look deeper and see, where are you not seeing your choices? Where are you expecting someone else to take care of what's yours? There's so many emotions and so many possibilities. I could probably talk about this like literally all day long.
Yeah.
But these emotions are trailheads. They're indicators of how you are perceiving yourself and your relationship. And it's often that's what you need to address in order for the relationship to change.
Yeah.
Often when couples get into conflict, they start fighting about a thing. I've had couples fight over who takes the trash out and whether or not to get a dog, or who bought the baking soda or didn't buy the baking soda, or who's supposed to pick up this child, whatever. And it's not about the thing. It's about the emotions underlying the thing. When you have the capacity to be aware of what your emotions are, and then to keep going and look for the meanings, what does that mean to you? That's when your conflicts start to turn into collaboration. And what I see people do is argue about the thing instead of making room to be curious about, what's going on for me? Why do I think this emotion is here? What's it trying to show me? What's my spouse's emotion? What is that indicating for them? And really opening up that space. Once you've made space for the emotional experiences and the meanings that that they may represent, then the collaboration and the partnership usually just starts to happen.
You know, I don't think
Um,
that we ever like said, now we're going to start collaborating. It just happened.
it just opens up these avenues, and yet people will fight about the thing and never get anywhere. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to like, what does this thing mean to me? What emotions come up around this thing? Anyways, and that's how you start to move through conflict. When you have the emotions, you've named them, you've felt them, you've accepted them, you've started opening up. What does this mean? Started getting questioning. And then from there, you usually have some kind of insight, some aha. I have believed this when it's not really true. I have believed that I need to dot, dot, dot. And that's not really true. I have felt that I should dot, dot, dot. And that's not really true. So from there, you take and you change, you literally renovate and rewrite your either beliefs or your perceptions. That creates new possibilities for new emotions, new behaviors, new patterns, not only in yourself, but in your marriage.
There's a lot. That's why Amy said we could probably spend days and days, maybe a workshop we need on this one, just on emotions. That's literally why we really coach couples, to be honest with you. They come in, as we said, with, hey, I want sex more frequently. I want it to be more novel, or my spouse doesn't give me this or that. And almost every time, if not every time, we work on the underlying processing of emotions and what it means, because until we can get there, then we can't be in relationship with each other. And so, as complex this is, we don't want to set this up for you to go, oh my gosh, it's so complex. One, we're here to help. If you find yourself in this place, and we've been in this place, we had some wonderful people that coached us through it to help us see our emotions, that taught us better how to process them. And we can teach you how to process yours better. But if you take nothing away from this podcast, and we've said it 100 billion times, and my clients, I drive them crazy. We're going to talk about it again. There's one simple thing that you can do daily that will send you down this path to start this process. I had this conversation with a coaching just last week, and they were like, I got to do what? I said, yes. And I told them this many times before. It's the emotional daily check-in. And he told me, I don't have enough time for that. We're busy. I said, 10 minutes. You get 10
Total.
minutes. That's total. And he said, no, it takes hours every time I talk about emotion. I'm like, yeah, because you're not talking about them every day. You're waiting until it's a major crisis, and then you're going to deal with them, and that's going to be in hours. And that's not what this is. It's not an emotional dump or vomiting. It's literally 5 minutes each expressing your emotions. And as the one spouse expresses their emotions, the other spouse has one job: shut up
And listen.
and listen. And the bigger job and the harder job for me, and this is where I talk about, this is the gym we're sending you to. This individual I was coaching works out a lot. And so I was able to use these analogies a lot with him about working out. I said, you are atrophy in your emotional processing. You sat on the couch and ate emotional potato chips. Now you're fat. And we got to get you in shape. And that's why it's a daily exercise. I said, hey, if you worked out in the gym once a month, would you get in shape? He's like, nope. Once a week? Nope. It's like, exactly. So we're going to do this daily. And we're going to do it. And the job of the person being quiet is to process through their emotions as they're listening to their spouse. And that was the hardest part for me. That was probably the biggest set of weights that I put on every day, was listening to Amy and having to process through my own emotions. Because I wanted to jump, and I wanted to say no, and I wanted to defend myself. And I said, that's not what I mean. All the things I had done before to justify the impact I had on her and her emotions, all I could do was sit and listen and be curious. And that's what teaches you. That's the gym of emotional workouts, is sitting and listening and processing that while we're doing this 5 minutes.
And my task listening was not to absorb every one of his emotions and take it on as my fault. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should be better. I should be more perfect. I should have seen that. I should have dot, 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 and so on and so on. Because I was such an emotions absorber. And so for me, learning to listen and not take accountability, I wasn't so much an emotions defender as an emotions absorber. So in the listening process, it was listen, but don't take this on. Make room for it, but don't absorb it.
Oftentimes, our clients get this confused with they want to make a list of all the things that their spouse has done to offend them or cause bad emotions.
This
That's
is
not what
not
it's
that.
about. They want to list all the sexual favors they want. That's not what this is about. It's simply to go throughout your day and express your emotions. And so the only way that we can really do this is actually to do this for you. So we're going to do today's emotional check-in right now, live on this podcast. And Amy didn't know I was going to do this. So it's a
No, I
surprise for
didn't.
her.
I'm like,
But we're
okay, give me a
going
second
to
to
do this.
collect myself.
So usually we ask who goes first. We switch back and forth. There is a little advantage to go second. I won't tell you what it is because I don't want you to take advantage of it. But there's a slight advantage because you have time to process through things before you get to it. But let's do this. Who's going to go first, babe?
Went first last night. I went first last night.
Okay, I'll go first. Here we go.
Okay.
Hey, babe. This morning I woke up and the wind was blowing and the rain was outside and I felt pretty safe and secure. That's the number one feeling I felt. I was really happy that we had our house, and this house is old. It was built in the 70s and redone, but it feels like it's secure and quiet as it rains outside.
Mm.
And that really kept me secure in my feelings. And most recently, I've started a new practice of checking in with myself before I actually reach for Amy. And so I spent some moments checking in and making sure I was centered, and that worked out pretty well. And I felt pretty good. And so I reached for you, and man, I had some amazing emotions. I felt connected, desire, love. Oh man, some really, really good emotions that came out of that. And I really enjoyed that. And then you had to leave, abandon me. And talk about going from heaven to hell. That's what happens when you abandon me. But I guess I got to have that so I know what heaven feels like. And so we had to get up and get on with our day. I really didn't have great emotions then. I have been in a new role with a new boss, and it's all new for me. And I've been doing this work and not sure that it's productive or what I need to do. And I felt inadequate. And I've gone from a director that's had teams to build and have people do it. And now I'm still a director, but they're asking me to do individual contributorship stuff. And there's really a lot of emotions around that. And so I was trying to avoid it by staying in bed with you all day, but that couldn't happen. So you had to go do your movement and you got up and left, and I had to go deal with mine. So I decided instead of just rushing into it, I'd actually clean up some of the house and some clutter and just think why I did it. And that really helped a lot, get me in a good place. I got up to work and I started meeting with my teammates and stuff like that, and always collaborating with them helps my emotions. And so those emotions got better. Today I got to go to the doctor, and usually that's a bad emotional thing because I really hate it. I hate doctors. Sorry if you're a doctor out there. I don't hate you just because you're a doctor, but I do hate doctors. But I have a really good I had a primary care physician, and that actually ended up better, and I was pretty happy with the direction that my health and well-being has gone. And so better emotions around that. Usually there's bad, but there's better. And then I got back into going into work and getting things done, and I worked throughout the day. Then we had to do a podcast. And in the middle of this podcast, I had an emotional crisis.
Mm.
And I felt like I was saying something and Amy was correcting me. And a flood of emotions came. And the funny thing is, you were talking about emotion chemicals being in your body, and I was feeling them. And I'm like, man, this is going to suck. Because what I really wanted to do was I wanted to regress and be my childish self. And I wanted to stomp out of the room or not say anything. I was going to let you do the podcast all by yourself because you knew everything and I did nothing. And I had to process through that and ask myself where that was really coming from. And I really got down to the point that it was more of my own inadequacies and fears about being inadequate and work through that. So I had to process through that. But all in all, I had a little roller coaster, as you can see, both good and bad, positive and negative. But I had a fairly good day. And I don't know why we do this, but we hand over, if you're not watching, you can't see this, but I have a talking stick in my hand and I'm holding the talking stick. So obviously Amy can't say anything. She got to put a bubble in her mouth. So I hand her over the talking stick.
The talking stick is being handed to me.
Yeah. We got to explain it.
I don't know why we do this.
I don't know why we do that either.
But we do.
All right. Now I'm just going to do my
You don't
job and
have
shut
to
up.
do that, by the way.
Yep.
Okay. I felt absolute, I think, joyful bliss this morning. I felt us holding each other. It was stormy outside, but it felt safe. I felt safe and secure. I felt adoring of you and adored by you. I felt cherished. It felt so rewarding and connecting. It was really hard to leave. And I also wanted to just live in this little cocoon of us all day. But I also know that I have my lovely clients that I also want to support and work to do. So I did abandon you. And I felt uplifted. I felt determined to go through my day showing up for myself and my clients. I felt overjoyed to podcast guests that we're going to have in the next coming month. I'm not going to say their names yet, but had emails from them and we've secured both of them, and I am thrilled. I felt sorrow with one of my clients. I felt proud of another coaching client. I felt motivated by another coaching call. And then right before we started the podcast, I felt exhausted. It was like all of these positive emotions had been carrying me. I've had a lot of sessions today, and then I felt exhausted. So you came in and were like, let's do this. And I don't know if I can. And I felt a little bit brain dead right before we started. Like, when your brain fog starts to settle in. So a little concerned that my brain fog was going to actually lead. And then in the middle, you did get upset and you shared that. I was surprised because I just didn't notice any slights that came from me. I felt sorrowful and I apologized and reached for you and felt your struggle and then felt you come back, and grateful for that and hopeful that this podcast will help someone wanting to know how to relate to themselves and their emotions differently. The end.
So that's where we'd end. Just a couple things to remember right here. Again, this is not a diatribe or a dump. And we don't stop and usually try to resolve or take care of things. It really is just a process through them. Now, if there's something major that happens while you're doing this dialogue, you don't want to just forget it. So you can say, hey, can we come back to this later? But if you see yourself doing that pattern over and over again, really it's taking this to where we don't want it. It's that daily exercise of being able to do this emotional check in that's going to allow you to be in emotional shape for when the big stuff hits the fan.
And it
You'll be able
will.
to, and it does. This week, I told Amy, I'm like, we haven't felt a lot of these feelings in a long time. Some of the same issues that we've dealt with for a very long time have popped back up. Time away from her, watching football popped back up this week. Really just having the tools in the toolbox to be able to get through those. And it all starts with being able to understand your own emotions and processing through them. It really has been a journey for each of us.
It was such a journey for me. It was such a journey. And I used to feel so trapped. And so talking about these things, even when I talked about the resentment I used to feel, it felt so trapping. I still have negative emotions now. I still feel them all the time, every day, throughout the day. This happened to be more of just a positive day in many ways. But I don't feel trapped by them anymore. And I think that's the aha I had during this. We used to have so many conflicts, and I would say, I feel so trapped. And I really did feel trapped. I didn't know how to move forward, and I felt stuck. As we've been doing this podcast, the aha for me is this is what opened that door, released me. So
Yeah.
I hope that it's helpful for any and all of you if you're feeling trapped or stuck.
Thank you so much for going on this journey with us. It really, like I said, has been helpful. Every time we get behind this mic and talk about it, it reminds us of where we've come from. There's a lot of hope out there. We would love to help you. Please come join us on langfordlifecoaching.com and go sign up for that free consult. We would love to have you. And don't forget, if you haven't already submitted the form to win 3 free sessions, please go do that too. Until next time,
Keep undressing your intimacy.
bye-bye.